And then it's sort of interesting because the first, I guess, band from outside of, your sphere that you brought on to Bar None was They Might Be Giants. And I was curious sort of how, that came together.
Uh, I was in Tompkins Square Park and I ran into a woman that I knew from high school, and she was with her boyfriend, who was John Flansburgh at the time. And I think he was in the process of nailing uh, vinyl flexi discs to telephone poles as a way to promote his band. He just sort of struck me as an interesting guy. Anyway, at some point he showed up at my house, and I don't know, I just started helping them out. This was before Bar None was really doing very much. And at some point, they just sort of said, we want to be on Bar None. They'd had trouble finding anybody that, they were a little outside of what people thought a band should be at that point, because they were just two guys and a drum machine. But having played in bands in big rock discos, as they were called, I sort of thought, oh, that makes sense. You get to control you get that big dance beat sound of like a record, and almost like a hip hop act or something, and you can sort of control those big unwieldy music venues where the bands don't really sound that good. And I was intrigued by that, and Tom liked them, and that became the second signing. It took I think we sold 10,000 copies in the first year, and then we got them on MTV, and things just took off. So from the very beginning, we sort of thought, oh, we know what we're doing, and we really didn't, but we got very lucky early on with a great band.
And you mentioned MTV there, and the video in question was for the song "Don't Let's Start."
Right.
And this was something I was actually really kind of curious about coming into this interview, was that, it was able to get on MTV, and that sort of helped get the album off the ground. Now, back then, how would you get a video on MTV?
Well, there was a show called 120 Minutes that was sort of a feeder show. Uh, but often you just got, that was just sort of, you were ghettoized into the 120 minutes. I mean, I like to take full responsibility for that getting on there, of course, but there were people we worked with. A woman named Gail Sparrow was somehow like a consultant, and I believe Rick Krim was there at MTV at the time. But I remember we had to come up with, we had to show that Don't Let's Start, was seriously happening at like college radio or something, but we'd already kind of worked it. Like, the record was a year old. So it's like, how do we get more life out of this? And what we ended up doing, we made an EP that had a song on the B side called High Were the Replacements, which they wrote about. They saw all the success that the Replacements were having. They were kind of, sort of fascinated by that. And so they wrote that song. And I thought, if we put that on a record, if we put Don't Let's Start on the A side and High Were the Replacements on the B side of a 12-inch, we can get, in a couple other songs, and we can actually get on the CMJ charts, the College Media Journal charts. And because the Replacements were like number one on CMJ at that point. So it worked. And they were actually playing High Were the Replacements, but the record was called Don't Let's Start because that was the A side. And so, we got the numbers from the B side that they were playing, but then we just presented as like, hey, look, Don't Let's Start. It's totally happening.
Yeah.
You should add it. And right at Christmas time, there's kind of a lull. Like none of the big record labels are pushing their product at that point. There's like that week or two break, and that's where we kind of slipped it in, and we got in there during the holidays. And then after Christmas, all the kids took their money to the record stores and bought the first They Might Be Giants album.
Right. Yeah. So in a way, it was not too dissimilar to, trying to get your song on radio. It was, like convincing the right people to, hey, we've got this
Yeah,
video and you should take a chance on it.
right. And we got very lucky. We were just it's the right mix of things at the right time, and uh, I don't think that that doesn't always happen. We were able to pull it off a couple times, but it's yeah.
Yeah, for
Now
sure.
he doesn't. It's sort of a thing of the past, really. But
Mhm.
that was the game back then.
Absolutely.
After
Yeah.
that, NPR for a while. You could really sell records through NPR, and that kind of faded away. There was a time when the Village Voice would sell a certain amount of records.
Mhm.
Different things at different times.
Yeah, absolutely.